So today I do have my friend Scott. And Scott is not only my friend and my colleague, but one of my coaches. I love to work with Scott because I am always learning. Scott is a guy from the whole world, and I am so excited about this interview. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Good morning, Tiago. I'm very good. Thank you. And thanks for such a kind introduction.
Oh, I thank you for your time. And as you know, we are having some talks upon this new normal, this so-called new normal that nobody knows for sure what is going to happen. But as we are strategists, we, even though we don't have the crystal ball, but we have the responsibility to imagine, to forecast, to foresee, and try to figure out what is coming. So could you give us kind of a big picture of what you can see for this next chapter of our lives?
That's a huge question. Let me see what I can do to answer you. So first of all, I don't think that so far the COVID situation has brought about major changes. What it has done is accelerated the path we were already on. So if we look at the tendency to shop online, or the tendency to work from home, or the emphasis on reducing travel for business purposes, these things were already happening. And what COVID has done is accelerate us to what some people call the new normal. I don't think there is such a thing as normal. I think we're on a continuum where we continually move, and we've just moved a little faster than we're used to on this continuum right now. And I hope the good thing that comes from what so far has been a terrible tragedy is that we can understand that the way we treat the planet and the way we treat ourselves has a strong feedback loop. And we're experiencing that now. We, for years, have been saying we are at risk of a virus, of a pandemic. This is not new discussion. There's a man from California, Larry Brilliant. He started talking about this on TEDx 16 years ago. And he very clearly laid out the risks we had. And, we had some foreshadowing of what's happening now with SARS, and then with MERS, and then with Ebola. So when people say this is unprecedented, I don't think that's very fair. I think this is completely precedented. It's just that we haven't experienced it. So in terms of what do I see coming next? I see coming next that people will start paying more attention to the environmental decisions the companies they work with are taking, the way that we invest our money, and the way that pension funds and other large state investors will allocate funds is going to be more in the direction of ESG, in the direction of environmental policies. And as a result of that, we'll see changes in the ways decisions are made, in the ways that boards are acting, and what boards will be doing. So I'm quite optimistic about our future, but it is going to be different. And the part that I'm optimistic about the most is we pay more attention to sustainability, to the circular economy, and also to make sure that inequality is being reduced. Many of the issues that we're seeing, for example, in the United States and the UK, those are issues of inequality. And this is not new. This is something we've known about for at least 100 years, if not longer, but we haven't taken action. And so now we're seeing people demand we take action. And as a result of that, it's quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, moreover, the low-income people was the most hit by this pandemic, isn't it? So maybe if we think about the fast pace that we are already living before COVID, but now, as you said, many things had accelerated even more, but there will be some behavior changing, not only for the organizations, but also for the individual. And these behavioral changes could drive somehow consumer behavior, because as we can see, the situation was a shock, not only in the supply, but also in the demand. So speaking about economy, you had a two-side shock. And as I said, the low-income people was the most affected one. And in countries, not only like Brazil, but I think many, many countries, we can see a huge amount of people changing maybe their mindset in looking for, not only looking for work and job, but maybe, for example, we can see an increasing rate of freelancers and gig economy and so on. You travel, well, you used to travel a lot across many countries. Do you see differences on the turning point that is now coming on? Because the pandemic was everybody in the same page in the first moment, but the rebounds, the coming back will be maybe not in the same page. So what do we see from east to west in this reopening?
Yeah, well, I think different countries are also at different stages of where this virus is impacting them. So, for example, in Europe, we had a terrible time with this at the end of February and the beginning of March. And now we're seeing that by making better decisions and being more careful, we're able to reduce the impact of the virus. Of course, in the Americas, both Latin America and North America, we're still getting hit pretty hard right now. And I think that will unfortunately continue for a longer period of time because it started later. So the countries are not all going to come out of this at the same moment. But what we've also seen is how closely interconnected our global economies are. The economy of China, of Thailand, is really intertwined with the economy of Italy and Brazil. And the economy of the United States depends on not only Western Europe, but also on Africa, on Southeast Asia. And so these global networks are positive in the sense that they bring a lot of people out of poverty and they give us a tremendous efficiency, but they also have some risks. And probably what most boards are discussing right now is how to build some more resilience into their businesses. This is the discussion we're hearing. When people look at strategy, they're also looking now at much more closely at risk and what could go wrong. And so they are asking questions that they kind of asked in the past, but now they're being much more rigorous in the thinking. And this will continue. And I think the companies, the organizations that are good at making their businesses more resilient will come out of this far faster than those that are not. And we're starting to see that in the way that valuations are changing. And there are already, it's becoming apparent, there's some pretty clear winners and unfortunately some pretty clear losers.
Besides the interconnectivity that we already have, that we already had, speaking about international trade, shall we see an increase or a decrease in globalization, or it's going to stay the same?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's two different pictures we need to look at to answer that question. There are some industries that will move closer to the end user as a result of this. And so, for example, we're seeing a lot of countries or the European Union or North America reshoring some of their medical device production. And most people didn't understand that over 90% of the protection equipment that we use in the medical business was being produced by one country, which put, of course, a huge risk on the supply chain. And I think China has actually done an amazing job of keeping other countries supplied in medical equipment, but the demand was just too great. And so now, taxpayers, voters are asking, why is something that is so critical to our survival being offshored 8,000 miles away? So those type of industries will move closer to home. There are some businesses I think it will be very difficult to move. Impossible is not the right word, but very difficult is. And for example, if I look at everyone has an iPhone or something similar. The scale that Foxconn, the producer, is able to achieve in China would be almost not impossible, but again, extraordinarily difficult to replicate anywhere else in the world. And so those type of industries, I don't see shifting in the next 10 years anyway. What I have encouraged the clients I work with to do for many years, and what they've done successfully, is operate what I call a 3-plant or 4-plant strategy. So they have production in Brazil. They have production in the United States or Canada or Mexico. They have production in Southeast Asia. So Japan, Thailand, China, Vietnam, India, depending on their industry, their customer base. And then they have production in Europe, in Germany, Italy, France, also in Central Europe, Slovakia, Serbia, etc. So I think we'll see more companies doing that. What they're realizing is to have all their production in one place makes their business very risky if that place is shut down or blocked. We have an automotive customer running the 4-plant strategy, and they've actually never had to shut down because when their Asia plant was shut, their other 3 were running. When their European plants were shut, the other 3 were running, etc., etc. So they've been able to keep production for all of their customers around the world. They didn't close for one day. And so that's really, really cool, in my opinion. And I think more companies will start to look at that and ask, where are we producing? What are we producing? And also getting all the advantages of being closer to your end customer. There's tremendous advantages when you are next door to your client as opposed to around the globe.
Interesting. So before we saw many plants being built in China, looking for cost reduction, and the target was always performance. And now looking not only for performance, but for resilience, we may see a shift in spreading around the world, 2, 3, 4 plants, looking for a better resilience situation. So this might increase globalization indeed, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of discussion right now about decoupling of economies, etc. And I guess in some sense, the friction between the United States and China was somewhat overdue. So if we go back to the 1990s, already there was beginning to be this discussion. And these are the number 1 and number 2 largest economies in the world. And so there are some discussion points between those economies. I don't think we will decouple our economies. I think we might have increased friction, but we will not decouple because it's not in anyone's interest to decouple. And look, there are some things that the United States is very good at producing or services they are supplying. And there's some things that also China is very good at producing and supplying. And so we have to create a framework where those 2 superpowers, for lack of a better word, can comfortably cooperate in a way that is in alignment with our beliefs about the environment, about the rights of people, and about promoting equality. Because I think we're going to hear this word more and more often, equality. And we need to really start to tackle it because it's not good for anyone when we get these huge separations in terms of capital and in terms of opportunity. And that's something that we need to work very hard to fix. And I think people are already looking at how they can do that.
Interesting. Let us go back to what you said before about changing valuation. I love your thoughts always about value drivers and how we can imagine, for example, a company. Let's take the common example. A company like Tesla with a valuation much higher than Ford, for example, with different, with huge different revenues and profits. We were already seeing these kind of things at Strategy Tools. By the way, we used to research and to develop a lot of content about business transformation and these new value drivers, let's say. I'd love to listen your thoughts about the new value drivers that we can look for in companies.
So if we take, let's start with the example of Tesla, Ford, and GM, because, recently the valuation of Tesla has been more than Ford and GM combined. And so what's going on there? Well, part of it, I'm not sure I completely agree with the evaluation of Tesla, just to be clear from the start. I think there are a lot of retail investors that may not have priced Tesla completely correctly. That being said, Tesla has done something really incredible because they are shifting the business model away from the traditional car and more towards a mobility solution. And this becomes really interesting because when I move away from the traditional car, I'm no longer selling a piece of steel or a piece of plastic. I'm selling the solution to a problem. The problem being that people need to get from point A to point B, and they want to do it in certain conditions and in certain ways. And so it's this change in business model that I think has really excited a lot of people. And the other thing that's excited a lot of people is, disrupting an industry that has been relatively stable for 100 years. So I believe we'll see a lot more of this. I think also some of the other automakers are doing really interesting things. Toyota and their mobility solutions has some very interesting projects going on, as does Hyundai. So it's not just a Tesla game. And I also don't think that Ford and GM and the big three in Germany, Volkswagen, Mercedes, and BMW, should be ignored because they have a lot of talent. They have big bases. They're catching up. They need to catch up. But this will also drive national investment. And that will be a part of the discussion as well. Taxpayers right now are asking, why am I bailing out dirty industries? So in Italy, we've had quite a bit of discussion about Fiat. Fiat, which owns Chrysler, produces a lot of vehicles that are diesel-based, a lot of vehicles that are maybe based on some, at one time, very impressive technologies, but they've kind of been left behind by how we're changing the way we live and the way we commute. And the government is preparing to give them 6 billion euros. And taxpayers and some politicians are saying, wait a minute, guys, what are you doing here? Like, why do we want to reward an old industry? We want to reward new industries. And that's where I think we'll see people like Tesla, maybe not Tesla. I mean, there are some big question marks around Tesla as well, but the idea of cleaner energy is not an idea that's going to go out of fashion. The current models we're using are not sustainable. And we can see that companies, I take Exxon as an example. So ExxonMobil, since 1920s, was one of the top 10 most valuable companies in the world. They never left that list since 1920, 1921. Today, they're out of the top 30, and they continue to go down. Now, I don't think that Exxon management is doing a bad job at extraction of carbon-based resources because they're very well known for this, and they have a lot of quality decision makers in that segment. But what the shareholders are saying is we don't want to allocate money to extraction of carbon-based resources. And as they move away from that, of course, the valuation of Exxon declines. Now, could Exxon have seen this coming? Yeah, I think they could. I think that the writing's been on the wall for some time. The discussion about ESG investing has started 20 years ago, but every year it's accelerating and getting louder and louder. And we see the large pension funds allocating more money to companies that are making sustainable decisions. We see the big asset allocators doing the same thing. And we see activist investors that are sitting on the boards of companies and demanding to those boards that we change. I wrote an article last year on activist investors, and that was following a convention in London that I attended that was discussing activist investing and what's going on. And a lot of that came down to people were going to change the boards of companies and whether the board liked it or not. So those things are all inputs into the valuation. The valuation is not just based on cash flow, it's based on how people believe the future will unfold and if that future is in alignment with their values and beliefs.
Yeah, much more complex than the discounted cash flow method that we all learned in the courses. But you spoke about investments. Whenever we imagine the huge investors like pension funds and also for example, the big oil and gas companies shifting their targeted investments,
right?
They are like engines for changes, aren't they? They are the not maybe the main engines for fastening the changes that we were already imagined that could happen.
Well, they are one lever we can pull, and that lever is quite powerful because they can get seats on boards. And at the end of the day, it's the board who is deciding the nature and direction of the company. The biggest changes usually come from government, not from companies. So I believe in using every lever we have available for change. One of those levers is activist investing. Another of those levers is board composition. And then, of course, we have regulation. I've been working on an energy project recently, and a big part of the discussion is on carbon pricing. So we have technologies to generate energy that are highly efficient. And if a carbon pricing model is implemented, as has been already in some countries, particularly the Nordic countries, clean energy becomes much cheaper than dirty energy. And I think we'll see that increase. I mean, let's take a look at one of the biggest players in the energy market in the world, the Chinese government and the Belt and Road Initiative. So the BRI, as it's called, is investing everywhere from Italy to Mongolia to Nigeria. We could have quite a geography lesson to Brazil, as a matter of fact. The BRI is quite active in Brazil and Argentina and Colombia and Chile. And what's going on there? This month, they canceled 17 projects for coal power. Why? These were new projects because the citizens of China were putting pressure on their government saying, we do not want to be investing in coal energy. It's not acceptable. And so it was the citizens of China that caused the government to say, oh, we cannot do this, and change their path. We've seen recently the same thing in Poland. There was a very large coal power project underway in Poland, and it mostly funded by the French, so Credit Lyonnais and Société Générale, and they've pulled out of the project. Because their shareholders said, guys, I don't want you investing in a coal-fired power plant. And so that project is now abandoned, and there'll be a couple of billion euros in losses, a write-down as a result of this project. But the Polish people don't want this project. The French investors don't want this project. The European Union doesn't want this project, so it's been stopped. And I think we'll see more of this. So yes, activist shareholders and big asset allocators, the Blackstones, the BlackRocks, the State Streets, they have a tremendous amount of power. But at the end of the day, they're also responding to their shareholders, which ultimately are usually pension funds, government funds, private-public partnerships. And so the power is really with each of us. I think that by communicating, we can make big changes. We just have to pick up the phone and tell local political representative, we do not agree with these projects. And if you keep deciding for projects of this type, we'll vote you out. And we have that power. So every person has power here. It's not only about who has money. Every single citizen and resident has both the power and the responsibility to use this power to shape the world the way we want it.
Cool. And what if we try to imagine the global liquidity that we are facing the next months? Because I think that, for example, venture capital was something amazing these last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Are we going to see the same waves of venture capital coming to different countries? Because of course, 25%, I think, of the venture capital of the world was in Silicon Valley, but there was this global liquidity flowing around the world. Mm-hmm. And now we face really low taxes, and in some countries we see taxes below zero.
Negative interest rates. Yeah.
Negative interest rates. What do you see coming from financial and the whole global liquidity picture?
This is a question we could write a book about, Tiago. Let's think here for a minute and break this into pieces. So I'll start with the venture capital question. So in the VC world, there has been a slowdown in number of deals done. If you look at the data that's coming from PitchBook, you can see deals or Preqin. Deals have decreased, but I think they're coming back. And part of it is people learning to work in new ways. So, you know, the idea of doing due diligence over a video conference was pretty rare idea up until March of this year. Not really very many people would do that. And being involved, working a lot with private equity until March of this year, I had never done work only remotely. So there was always a remote content piece, but there was also a lot in person. And this, of course, has changed. Venture capital will come back. Venture capital will, I think, increase in importance, as is private equity and all alternative capital methods, increasing in allocation and increasing in importance. Because, as you said, we're not getting the returns on our money we need. So if I put my money in the bank, I actually got my bank statement this morning, and I saw I have a negative interest. So my bank is charging me for the privilege of keeping my money. So how long will I accept that? Not very long before I'll say I need to find a better return. I'm paying the bank to spend my money. And so this will open up more venture capital. This will open up more private equity, more private debt. All the alternative capital instruments will increase. And maybe we'll see people also getting a little bit smarter. Unfortunately, not everyone has been a good actor in this situation. If we look in the Financial Times in the last couple of weeks, there have been some very strange stories coming out about some of the largest funds and their behavior. And I think that people will become aware of that. And some of the valuations also got to be unrealistic. A company with no revenues and no business model raising hundreds of millions of euros. This we will see less of. But I do believe that people that come with good ideas and with viable business models and with a quality team will continue to get funded. And I'd also look at this in two timeframes. So let's look at the short time frame and the longer time frame. In the short time frame, we need governments to step up and provide convertible loans. This is already happening in Singapore, and this is fantastic. So I think Singapore is way ahead. You might have noticed I shared some thinking on this week on LinkedIn about how Singapore is supporting the venture capital and private capital initiatives, which is wonderful. I think the UK is going to do something very similar shortly. We need more of this because in the short term, there's a funding crunch, and it would be irresponsible and economically damaging to let good businesses fail. In the longer term, I think there will be a little bit of I would call it back to reality. So you cannot have a business model that doesn't have a route to profitability. Investors are going to start to look a lot more at the fundamentals again. When is your cash flow positive? When will you be profitable? What is the customer willingness to pay? Out of that willingness to pay, how much value do you capture? Who else could capture value? We're going to get back to some, I'd call it basic questions that for some reason got left out. You can see there is a tremendous amount of what the industry calls dry powder at the moment. So dry powder is money that has been committed to investment, but has not been invested. And that is at a record high. So where's that money going to go? Well, if it's not used, investors are going to be very upset because I commit capital because I want you to use it, not so that you can charge me fees. And so I think we will see the funds using this. Maybe they'll be a little more, they'll ask a few more tough questions rather than just looking how they can do a deal.
Really interesting, Scott. Let's speak about leadership. How do you see leaders, business leaders, prepared for this new normal?
Yeah, so just like COVID, COVID hit some people very hard, unfairly hard, and it was quite tragic. And other people didn't even know that they had the virus until they got an antibody test done. And this is true also with companies. This is true in some level with national economies. And this is definitely true with leaders. So some leaders were very well prepared for this situation. And they did a very good job of communicating tough decisions with their stakeholders. And they made responsible decisions based on the best data they had available. And I think that what we saw good leaders do is blend responsibility, fiduciary duty, stakeholder responsibility, and empathy. And that is what people will remember. This virus, this COVID situation really tested the integrity of leaders. And some people passed that with flying colors, and it's admirable how they have handled this. Some others, unfortunately, didn't. If we take a look at, the largest businesses in America in February signed a document saying that they no longer would only take shareholder value into account in their performance. Some of these companies really held on to that belief, and they demonstrated it during COVID. Unfortunately, a few of these companies, after promising to behave in a responsible way, fired all their employees. Now, of course, people have to take tough decisions, but I find that not everyone took decisions with the amount of integrity that we would expect. And I think every customer, every employee, every shareholder, every stakeholder is going to remember how leaders behaved in this period. And the leaders that behaved well, these people will choose to work for, to do business with, to invest in. And those people who did not do well, unfortunately, this is going to be what defines them. This is a defining moment. And people are going to remember this leader stepped up to the plate and did something that made us all very proud. And this leader did not. And that's it. It's moments of crisis that define who you are as a person. It's quite easy to do the right thing when everything's going well.
Yeah.
It's when we are up against the wall with very few choices, very few options, that then we see who behaves with integrity and who doesn't.
Yeah, this idea of stakeholders capitalism and this integrity test that you said, it's complex. It's a beautiful concept, and I think there is something to feed our hope in order to figure out better organizations for us all.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, I think that developing leaders for this kind of decision-making
Mm-hmm.
pressure is a lot of difficulty. And I read some books by Barbara Kellerman, the Harvard
Yeah.
professor. She's a faculty member that inspires me a lot because, for example, when she speaks about the end of leadership, she goes back to Confucius and Plato,
Right.
saying that there are some things that we couldn't yet realize how to do better than the classics, for example. And as you said, about integrity, ethics, and kind of a virtual model for leadership. This is something difficult to plan and deliver, to design and deliver in terms of education, because it's a whole path. It's an entire life education. Yeah. We love to speak about lifelong learning today. This is another buzzword, lifelong learning. But maybe this turning point that we are living today with COVID and so on, maybe there are going to be some open doors for fresh thinking on our human situation, and not only because of the environmental issues, but as you said, about ethical issues. Let me insist a little bit in the leadership theme here. Do you see differences amongst leaders around the world? I mean, speaking about culture, do you see differences from west to east? For example, whenever we imagine Indian, I know that Indians are usually great mathematicians, but they are also very creative guys.
Yeah, sure.
We know that the Chinese has this Confucianism embedded in their veins. We know that here in the West, we are a different culture, Christian, and how do you see these differences, these cultural differences amongst the world organizations as a context for emerging better leaderships?
Well, I've seen in all the countries you've mentioned, and in all the various religions and cultures, I've seen great leaders. I don't know if it's necessarily, I can compare and contrast because it's quite complex. And even within some countries, there are many, many religions in India. There's not just Hinduism or not just Islam. There are a lot of different religions, Buddhism, for example. What I see with all great leaders is they take the larger community into consideration. And they look at where the future is going and they move in that direction before other people. I can give you an example. The CEO of Pepsi Cola. So Pepsi Cola is an incredibly successful company. The shareholder returns are impressive. And they took on the biggest beverage company in the world, Coca-Cola, and they won in many markets. So if I look at a shareholder wealth point of view, Pepsi Cola is very impressive. Now, if I take the point of view of health, maybe Pepsi Cola is not always perfect. And we know that sugary carbonated drinks are not good for our health. Having worked with the pharmaceutical companies in Latin America, for example, I saw the impact on children of drinking too much soda, pop, sugary drinks every day. They were having their kidneys fail when they were 12 years old in the favelas and in some areas of distress in Buenos Aires. And this is terrible. What this CEO did, and she was very smart, is a few years ago, she communicated to Pepsi, look, we cannot depend on sugary drinks to be our future. We have to do something more, something better. And some executives in Pepsi were very upset by this because they said, this lady is wanting to kill our business. You know what? We're the best in the world at making these sugary drinks, so let's just make them. And you know, who is she to decide what's good or is bad? But she's a very, very tough leader and a very fair leader. And she continued on this path, and it's something I really admire, because today Pepsi is a much more diversified company. And we see there's a big trend away from sugary soft drinks. People are aware of their health. A few years ago, if you walked into my offices, you would see a lot of people with a Coca-Cola or Pepsi Cola, something similar. Today, we all have water bottles. You know, we don't have any more, in our office, we don't even have a machine for distribution of those products any longer. And so, you know, she was ahead of the curve, ahead of the market. And that's because she wasn't only looking at shareholders. Now, shareholders have also done very well under her leadership, but she looked at where the market was going and how Pepsi could be a socially responsible company. And I think we're going to see this combination. You know, you and I, we talk a lot about strategy. Well, strategy is about the future. And when we look at the future, we have to understand also the trends. Where are things going to? And I'll tell you, the sector I think that's going to be in trouble next is social media. Because social media is kind of the, you know, the smoking of our decade. So when I was younger, I was a smoker. Everyone I knew was a smoker. My wife was a smoker. No one smokes anymore. What happened? Well, we became aware that for our health, using these products was not good for us. And so none of us smoke anymore. If you look in Italy, the number of adults smoking went from almost 60% to 15. And so if a company had been ahead of that curve, they would be in a much better position. And now I think social media is in the same position. So a number of high profile people have departed from Facebook recently. Some people that were very senior in Google have left the company recently, and they're saying, I don't agree with what we're doing. And so I think that's an industry, if I give you an example, where the leadership needs to step up. They need to communicate what do they believe in, and they need to start to behave responsibly, because if they don't, they won't get the best employees, they won't get the best shareholders, they'll be legislated out of business. Or the legislation will make them a very different business. And so they need to be paying attention to this and anticipating the future. You know, no one wants to be in the coal power plant business anymore. It was a very good business, by the way, for 100 years. And there are some companies that are excellent in that industry. It's just that the industry itself has become relatively unattractive. And when your industry becomes unattractive, even the good players get punished.
Nice. And what about technology, Scott? Not only software, but technology as a whole. You just used the word trends. And whenever we speak about technology, we are trying to figure out which are the main trends that will trigger the next markets. But technology is an enabler. Somehow it's an enabler. We got it for sure in the late the 20th century, an exponential curve on new technologies. But now I see some scientists, not technology guys, but scientists, criticizing our lack of innovation. For example, telling us that the beginning of the 21st century is much less creative, inventive, and innovative than the previous. How do you figure out our technology development are going to be in the next decades?
Well, that's a really difficult question to answer. Technology to me, as you said, is an enabler. I agree with you on this. I think also technology accelerates convergence. So we have different industries and they move together. You know, if you think up until 20 years ago, the music industry was very segmented. There were people who recorded music, there were people who produced CDs, there were people who sold CDs, and these were all huge companies. Tower Records was a global player in the music business. United Artists, another global player. Some of the richest people in the world started these kind of companies. And now we have it all coming together, and we have it on our phone, iPhone, Android phone, whatever phone you have. So this is an example of convergence. I think most of the technological breakthroughs that we've had in the world have come during times of crisis. You know, humans are incredibly resilient. And so if a technologist said, well, this decade hasn't been very creative yet, I don't know. I mean, it's always hard to say at the moment. Looking back, we can evaluate fairly. But what I am quite sure is that coming out of the COVID situation and coming out of some of the social unrest we see around the world right now, there will be solutions that are positive and where humans will demonstrate resilience. What else I would say is that as this convergence continues, we're going to have to be very careful that we don't allow too few companies to concentrate too much power. And there's a really good book about this, if you have a chance to read it. This is by a friend of mine from the United States, Amy Webb. The book is called The Big Nine. And what she talks about in this book is how Alibaba, Microsoft, Tencent, Amazon, Facebook, Baidu, Apple, and Google are reshaping humanity. And she uses those words of reshaping humanity. It's a fascinating read. I highly recommend it. It's been recognized for many awards. But we do have to be careful about the concentration of power and who has that power. And I think it's quite logical that governments and taxpayers are asking questions about how big should we allow Amazon to be? You know, how big should Facebook be allowed to get? If these become monopolies and they vacuum up everything around them, this is not healthy for society. And they need healthy societies as well, because if people don't have money, they're not going to be buying books from Amazon. And if people don't have money, they're not going to advertise on Facebook. So we need to address these factors for all the companies' survivals. I think the technology that is the big unknown at the moment, and where I am fascinated, I'm spending a lot of time, is on artificial intelligence. So computers are becoming very good at machine learning. If you look at the cost of computing for these types of activities, it is collapsing. So, you know, 5 years ago, if I said I want to get into machine learning and artificial intelligence, I would need a huge budget to do that. Today, anyone can buy a little bit of time on the cloud. People like IBM even give away free time that you can use in the cloud to experiment, to test new things. And so artificial intelligence will reshape how we live and how we work. And I ultimately believe this will be very positive, because I think we have some huge challenges coming. I think COVID is the party compared to what comes next. So
nice. We are getting close to the end, Scott. What would be your recommendations for leaders, for strategists around the world in general? And if you could, please, what would be your message for Brazilian leaders?
Well, I'll start with my message for people working on strategy around the world. Be curious, ask questions, take courses. You know, one of the most incredible things that has come out of this challenge of COVID is that we can take courses from the world's greatest thinkers, and they're all online. Yesterday, I was participating in a call with INSEAD. This morning, I was on a chat with London Business School. You know, these are people, they've spent their life thinking about strategy. We have our very own strategy tools that is doing some super cool stuff that I would take a look at. I would just keep asking questions and take the information and use it. So, I like to take what I learn and go directly to clients and say, let's look at this. If we have a new framework, if we have a new tool, if we have a new simulation, I'm really looking forward to running a simulation in July with a small group of executives here in Northeast Italy, where we look at what the future of transformation could be. And so I would recommend to anyone interested in strategy, now is the time to ask questions and to learn more than ever before. What do I recommend to Brazilian leaders? Wow, Tiago, I'm not a politician.
Well, let's speak for business leaders.
Brazil is an amazing country. Yeah, I've had very good experiences working with Brazil. I spent quite a bit of time there with some large pharmaceutical companies, and it's an amazing country. My recommendation to Brazil is to diversify the economy. The economy is still far too dependent on resource export. And I think that's short-serving, because I see amazing entrepreneurs in Brazil. I see amazing business leaders, and I think we're not tapping the full potential of those people. Similar to what I see in Italy, there's too much bureaucracy. This bureaucracy is stifling creativity, is stifling entrepreneurship, and is stifling creativity. So, we need to reduce everywhere bureaucracy, and we need to ensure that we do our best to eliminate corruption. I'm not a naive guy. I don't think that you can ever say we'll have zero corruption in the world, but we have to understand corruption is a cost, and we're all paying for it, and it makes our companies less competitive. And some of the greatest leaders I work with, and I have worked with, they really worked on compliance and elimination of corruption in Latin America, in Southern Europe, and they were highly successful. So it can be done. It's not a situation of hopelessness. It's a situation of taking control and making responsible decisions and understanding how we can take control of the situation. We don't need corruption. It's a value destroyer. And so we can work on eliminating that. And, again, just like everywhere else in the world, resilience. I think Brazil is a very resilient country. I cannot wait to come visit again when it's possible to do so. And I look forward to seeing you in Sao Paulo and to traveling throughout the country, because it's an amazing place.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I agree 100% with everything that you said. Final question. What would be your desired new normal if you could change something through this moment? What would be your desired new normal?
Yeah, people to take decisions thinking more about the future. Okay, we all live in the present, and this is important, but also to take decisions thinking about how we're going to leave the world for the generations that come after us, how we are treating animals, how we're treating our environment. Not everything, and I'm a very tough believer in EBITDA and in total shareholder return, and I won't be a person to leave money on the table unnecessarily, but I do not believe that making poor decisions for the environment is ever a good investment for anyone. So I would like to see people coming out of this very challenging time insisting that all of our leaders and ourselves behave more responsibly. And I think that we're getting closer to that. And so that would be what I'd love to see coming out of this: better strategic decision making.
Cool, that's nice. That would be my desired new normal too.
Cool.
Well, my friend, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for this conversation. I expect to see you again, and soon I would like also to go to Italy. I also miss airplanes. I love to travel too, and maybe we can find ourselves together, both in Sao Paulo and in Milan.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you here. My office is very close to Venice, so if you come visit me, we can go have a beautiful lunch in a little baccaro in Venezia.